Hello everyone and welcome to the Vash tutorial series. Vash is a web-based animation suite that runs entirely in your browser and is capable of producing output videos complete with audio at any resolution. My name is Clayton and I am the creator of Vash. I also created the social animation site Drawn, I compose music sometimes, and I am the author of the science fiction novel Holocene. In this video, I'm going to give you an overview of Vash and layout of the interface. Future videos will be dedicated to specific features within Vash and show you all the juicy details. At the time this video was created, Vash was in an alpha release state and being constantly updated based on my own testing and feedback from alpha testers. So by the time you view this video, some aspects of the interface may have changed. Also note that Vash is designed to work best on desktops, though I do plan to do more extensive testing on tablet devices in the future. I am just one man doing this for fun, so please bear with me. I'm also a programmer, not an artist, so I apologize in advance if my examples are not particularly beautiful. Now on to the video. If you're new to animation, the following is a brief overview of how animation works. Feel free to skip it if you're already familiar with animation software. Traditional animation was drawn and colored frame by frame. These individual frames, when displayed in rapid succession, give the illusion of motion to the human eye. When it comes to classic animation, techniques were often employed where static or non-moving backgrounds had transparent plastic cells overlaid in order to only have to redraw the moving parts. Modern animation software still utilizes these basic concepts, but takes advantage of the fact that the computer can do a lot of the repetitive and time-consuming work. Plus, it's a lot easier to correct mistakes. When you first get into Vash, you're presented with the splash page, where you can either start a new animation or open an existing animation from a few different sources. Regardless of which path you choose, it all leads to the same place, the Vash editor. I'm going to go ahead and start a new project. You'll see that by default you're creating an animation at high definition resolution, which is 1920 by 1080 pixels, and with a speed of 24 frames per second, or FPS for short. We'll leave all these values as their defaults right now and hop right in. The editor is divided into four main sections. The header bar at the top, which has the Vash menu under the cow, your save options next to the save icon, undo and redo, your user menu if you happen to be logged in, and access to the Vash help system. The stage where the current clip you're editing is presented. All drawing is done here. The red line is the y-axis and the blue line is the x-axis, with the stage centered around 0, 0. The dark orange box is the actual stage area that will be rendered to video. Anything outside that box will not be rendered. Vash's stage is infinite, meaning you can pan around and draw outside the bounds of the final video. The right sidebar, which contains your toolbar and the two most important tabs, the Properties tab and the Library tab. It also additionally contains the Markers tab and the Search tab, which we'll get into in future videos. And finally, at the bottom is the timeline. This is the section where you lay out the pieces of your animation and determine when they appear on the screen and for how long. Even modern digital animation is still performed frame by frame, so the columns in this grid are broken up into individual frames, starting at frame 0. By default, there are 24 frames per second in this animation, which you can see by the 1 second text, the 24 frame mark. Each row in the timeline represents what Vash calls a layer, and each layer can contain multiple timeline objects, which are the things that actually get rendered in your animation. Note that only one object can occupy a single frame in a layer at a time. This means that if you want two rectangles visible at the same time, you're going to need two layers. Drawn renders from bottom up, so layers at the bottom will be drawn behind layers at the top. Layers can be reorganized via the hierarchy component, but I'll get into full details about layers in a future video. Sizing grips exist between the three lower sections, allowing you to expand areas that you wish to see more detail in. If you are a keyboard and mouse person like me, note that there are several hotkeys that are available depending on which section currently has the mouse cursor in it. Those will eventually be fully listed in the documentation that I am currently writing. Whenever you click on an object or layer in the timeline, or click a blue gear icon in the Headers or Library tab, the Properties tab displays the information about that object. If you come from a programming background, Vash uses an entity component model, which is similar to a lot of game engines out there. What this means is that every object in Vash can have components added to it to provide additional functionality or effects to the object, but we'll get more into that in future videos. For this introduction video, I'm going to create a simple scene with the blue sky, green grass, and a box that moves across the screen. To start, I'm going to select the layer at frame 0. I'm going to go and choose my composite shape rectangle tool, and I'm going to create a rectangle that extends beyond the borders of the stage. You'll notice that as soon as I drew the rectangle, the Properties tab updated. Most of these properties we can ignore for now, but you'll see there's a rectangle component where I can adjust the width and the height of the rectangle. There's also a transform component where I can affect the physical placement properties and orientation of the rectangle. Users of game engines and other animation software should find this very familiar. And like everything else, there is a general component where we can change the name of the object or delete the object or add additional components. Below the properties of our rectangle is a hierarchy that says composite shape 1, with our rectangle indented below as a child of it. I'll get into composite shapes in the future, but the short version is that you can add several intersecting simple shapes to generate more complex composite shapes that all share one fill and one outline. If you want to change the color and outline of our rectangle, you'll need to select its composite shape, and then we can do stuff like change the fill color to be more of a nice sky blue, or adjust things like the opacity, etc. You'll notice that in the Properties tab, you can either type a value manually, or if there's a blue-colored text before the number, you can click on that text and drag it around to adjust those values quickly. Now I'm going to go here, and I can either use Control-L in the timeline, or I can drop down this menu and add a layer. I'm going to now add our grass as another rectangle down here at the bottom. And I'm going to select its composite shape, change its color to a lovely green. There's my grass. And then I'm going to add yet another layer to create the object. This time I'll use a composite shape circle. I will grab it and move it over here. And we'll give it a nice, yellowish color. All right, so we have some stuff on our stage. Let's hit the play button. We can either press the play button here in the timeline, or if the mouse is over the stage or the timeline, we can press spacebar to start playing. And you'll notice that the properties window goes blank. In play mode, nothing selected, so don't freak out. You'll notice that nothing is actually happening right now. That's because the objects we drew only exist in frame 0, and our animation is therefore only one frame long, and it's just looping over that one frame again and again. Let's stop playing. If we wanted our objects on the stage to persist for an entire second, we can use the mouse to grab the edge of each object and stretch them out to the 1 second mark. Alternatively, we can go to the composite shapes timeline component and manually set a start and end frame there. Now when we hit play, you see that the timeline is actually looping over 1 second of the objects that we have. It's still terribly uninteresting, so how about we animate that circle? Rather than positioning our circle on every frame, we can use a technique called tweening, where we tell Vash where we want the circle to start and where we want it to end by what frame, and then Vash figures out all the positions between so that you don't have to. The quickest way to set up tweening in Vash is to set keyframes for specific properties on components and let Vash tween the values between those frames. The easiest way to do that in Vash is to turn on recording, which is the circular button next to play. When it's on, it's red. When record mode is on, any changes you make to any properties that have keys next to them are recorded as keyframes in the currently selected frame. It's easy to make mistakes, so be aware when you have record mode on. Now suppose I want to move our circle to the right edge of the screen and back again within 1 second. To start, I want its current X position to be a keyframe, so in frame 0, I hit the key icon next to the value. You'll see it lights up yellow. Then with recording turned on, I go to frame 12, which at 24 frames per second is half a second into our animation, and I go to the Property tab and I drag our X position all the way to the edge or if I want, I can type it. I could then go to frame 24 and put it back where it started. Now when I hit play, record mode automatically turns off, and we see our circle being animated across the screen. Even though we only set values in 3 frames, Vash is doing the math to figure out what the values between the keyframes should be. Every property that has a key beside it can be animated in this fashion, allowing you to do some pretty complex things without a lot of effort. The timeline also has a keyframe view for the currently selected object, accessible by clicking on the little key here. This changes the timeline to show you the properties that have been keyframed and allows you to easily modify the keyframes. For example, if you didn't want the value of x to be tweened between frames 0 and 12, double-clicking on the little orange arrow in frame 0 will change it into a red square. This means that no tweening will take place, and if you play it, you'll see the circle magically jump to the right edge at frame 12 and then animate back to the left edge by frame 24. You can also click and drag the orange arrows or red squares around in order to change where the keyframes actually are. If I move the keyframe at frame 12 over to frame 18, it will now take longer for our circle to get to the right side and then faster to move back to the left. Now that we've created an animation masterpiece, we can choose to save it by clicking on the disk icon in the header. We can save to local browser storage, which means it will only persist for this browser on this machine, which will only last as long as the browser cache. So if you're in incognito mode, it will be gone when you close all open incognito windows. We can download the animation as a .vash file to upload back in for editing in the future on this or any other device, or if you have a premium account, you'll be able to save to the cloud and access it from anywhere. I don't want to save this animation right now, so I'll cancel out of this. If we want to export our animation, I can click on the little drop-down menu next to the Save button and choose Export Video. Expect more on this pop-up in the future, but for now, if I hit Export, Vash generates an MP4 file for me to download, which I can then include in this video for posting to YouTube. Behold our 1-second rectangle animation. Note that non-premium accounts will have some version of a watermark on the videos. This concludes my introduction video to Vash. I hope it gives you enough information to start playing around a little bit. There is still so much more to Vash, and I will get to it in future videos. Please subscribe and hit that notification button so you know when I put new videos out. If you do create your own videos using Vash, please send me the link so I can see what amazing things people create with my tools. Thanks for watching.